In this lesson, we are going to talk about typography. Automatic CSS offers responsive, scale-based typography out of the box. Let's go ahead and take a look at exactly how it works. Okay, so as we see on the left, we have our various heading levels. As we see on the right, we have our various text levels. How do you achieve this automatic, responsive, scale-based typography with automatic CSS? Do you need utility classes? Do you need variables? What do you need? Actually, you don't need anything. As soon as you set the proper heading level, automatic CSS will instantly take over. Now, that is with headings. What about with text? With text, we have what is called base text. It's just your whatever text you would add to a website. That's like your base level text. Automatic CSS will handle that out of the box and treat it as your medium or base text size. But if you want other text levels to be in play, you do have to use a variable or a utility class. In this case, I've put the text XXL utility class on the text that I want to be the biggest, and then XL and L, and then this, of course, is M. It doesn't need anything, S and XS. As you can see, automatic CSS just uses what are effectively t-shirt sizes. So medium t-shirt, large t-shirt, extra large t-shirt. It's very easy to understand. It's very easy to put into practice and use. Anybody can pick it up very, very quickly. Okay, let's start by talking about root font size. I'm not going to go into detail on what root font size is or how it works. I've already done an entire lesson that covers root font size in my Page Building 101 course, which is 100% free. So there's no reason you shouldn't watch it. I'm going to post the lesson down below. I would highly recommend you watch that lesson. I would highly recommend you do the entire course. It's actually a really good prerequisite for this course. All of the fundamentals of modern web design with page builders is covered. It's going to turn you into an absolute pro. Okay, but that's a side tangent, a side quest. We don't need to go on that side quest right now. So let's go ahead and just talk about root font size quickly. If you're a beginner or intermediate, I would recommend you set your root font size at 100%. If you are a pro and you want to use the alternate of 62.5% and you know the ramifications of that and how it all works, then you can do that. But if you are a beginner or intermediate, I would recommend you stick with 100%. That is the industry standard. That is the norm. That's what most people are going to expect to see. Okay, let's move on. That's all we need to say about that. Go watch the video on root font size. What we need to talk about are base heading size and your type scale. And actually, before we dive into this, one last thing that you need to know, the headings and the text are separate systems in automatic CSS. This means all of your headings can be controlled independently of all of your text. There is no forced or shared styling, so unless you want there to be. So what that essentially means is that you have ultimate flexibility, right? We used to, in old days of automatic CSS, those two systems were tied together. I can't remember exactly what version it was. It was a long time ago now that we separated them and made the systems independent, and it provides way more control and way more options, okay? So you do need to know that these are independently controlled, and that's why in the dashboard you have your headings area and you have your text area. A lot of the controls will look similar. The reason that it seems like they're very similar is because they are. It's just a control for text versus controls for headings. Let's talk about base size. So in the hierarchy of H1 to H6, if we tried to map these to t-shirt sizes with XXL being the biggest, which one would be XXL in terms of our headings? Obviously, it would be H1. That would be the XXL size. Now, the next down would be XL. That's your H2. The next down from there would be L, which is H3. What would be M? H4. So H4 is your base heading size. See how that works? So we correspond our t-shirt size system of text with our heading system. All right, so that they equally match. They both have the same bases, okay? So H4 is essentially equal to M on the text size side. All right, so knowing that the H4 is the base, I see here that I have a base set heading size control, and I have a number here, 18 pixels. If I change this number, let's say we're gonna change it to 30. We're gonna make it huge, okay? What would you expect to happen? Would you expect only the H4 to change, or would you expect all of these heading sizes to change? Okay, let's do it and let's see what happens. So I make it 30. As you can see, all of the heading sizes changed. The H4, if I measured it, would be equal to 30 pixels. That's what you should expect. Now, why did the other sizes change? The other sizes change because this is a scale-based typography system. It means every size is relative to the size adjacent to it. Okay, so the H3 right here is 1.333 times bigger than the H4. And then this is 1.333 times bigger than that. And this is 1.333 times bigger than that. That is the math scale being used. Now let's move on to type scale. You have control over the scale being used. There are very common industry, accepted scales actually from a music system. And if you would like to access those, you can simply hit up or down on your keyboard and Automatic CSS will actually cycle through them. And I just want to keep cycling as we look at the text over here and see what's happening, okay? So I have a very small scale. What do you notice when the scale number is very small? And what do you notice as the scale number gets bigger? And maybe you can tell this or not tell this just by eyeballing it, but this H4 heading right there, does it get bigger or smaller as I adjust my scale? It actually does not change. Why? Because it's the base. The scale does not affect the base. The base is only affected by the base size, okay? The scale affects everything around the base size, everything adjacent to it, okay? So everything is tied together, everything is relative, which means my base size will make everything bigger if I make that number bigger, and it'll make everything bigger in the same proportion. And if I make the base size smaller, everything will get smaller by the same proportion. However, if I adjust the scale, the degree of change between the sizes will change. A bigger scale means a bigger degree of variation, and a smaller scale means a smaller degree of variation. So again, I'm gonna go down with my scale, and you see that the variance between the sizes, like it's a much tighter system. Okay, there's not a lot of degree of change between the sizes. They're all very consistent. There's still a hierarchy, of course, but they're much more even with each other, okay? Now, as I go up with my scale, the degree of variance changes dramatically. The H1 is way larger than the H4, okay? And you see a much greater hierarchy. These are two different levers that you can pull to dial in the typography system to however you would like it, okay? Now, if you don't understand scales all that much or aren't sure what a good scale actually is, I would just use one of the music presets. Just go up and down with your keyboard, find the scale that makes the most sense. Then use the base size lever, like just determine, do I want my sizes to be radically different from each other, or do I want them to be more conservative and closer together? Then use your base size lever to really dial in things the way that you want. Also keep in mind, there is a min value to all of this, or what you can just decipher as like a mobile value, okay? So you can affect, like my base size on desktop can be very big, but on mobile, I can shrink everything down a lot. Remember, this is automatically responsive. There's no breakpoint management. You're just choosing a minimum value and a maximum value, okay? Same thing with the scale. On desktop, you can have a radical scale. And then on mobile, you can have a very conservative scale because there's not a lot of space on mobile. We need things to be tighter and more even on mobile, right? Well, you can go wild on desktop, and then as things scale down, it'll start to get more and more conservative, okay? So you have, again, total control over this situation. I'm gonna set the defaults back here. Perfect, okay? So we went over our base size, we went over our type scale. If I switch over to text, the exact same controls are available. Remember, they're independent systems. So as I adjust things under text, nothing will change with regard to my headings. I am only affecting text levels right here. All right, the next thing that we need to talk about is manual overrides. A lot of people will ask me, Kevin, I love the scale system. I love that I don't have to think. I don't have to choose values manually. I don't have to do breakpoint management with this stuff, but I only want that to be like H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. I want really big, bold H1 headings. I need to like detach them from the scale system and just set a manual size. Can I do that with Automatic CSS? Yes, the answer is yes. In fact, not just with your H1, you can detach any heading level size and set manual values for it. Let me show you how to do it. So under headings, I'm going to choose H1 and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here and you're going to see font size override. You're going to see two inputs. Once again, it's asking you, what do you want it to be on mobile? What do you want it to be on desktop? And it's going to make it fluidly responsive between those two numbers. Now, here's the thing. Watch this. I'm going to put a value of 80 pixels in the desktop value. Okay, so I'm going to say 80. And you're going to notice that my heading just jumps out of the scale. It's like, it doesn't care what these other heading sizes are doing or what the scale is. It's just being 80 pixels. Now, I didn't even set a minimum. Here's the cool thing about Automatic CSS. I'm just saying, hey, just let this thing be 80 pixels and then scale it down from there. And you would think it would be like, but scale it to where? It's going to scale it to its old default based on the scale you've already chosen. So you don't even have to come up with a minimum value. You could just say, hey, this is what I want it to look like on desktop, and then you handle the rest of it on mobile the way you're handling all of my other headings. It's going to work just like that out of the box, okay? Now, if you do want to override the mobile value, you absolutely can. You can put whatever you want here. If I want it to be 12 pixels on mobile, it'll be 12 pixels on mobile, okay? So we'll go down here and we'll see that on mobile, it is getting much, much, much smaller. I don't think that's actually 12 because we're not able to get down to our actual minimum. If we go back to our layout and we go to website dimensions, it's actually looking for 320 as the minimum. So it would be that 12 at 320, but our preview right here can't even get, it's at 477. So we still have a little bit ways to go on our heading, but notice my heading 1 is smaller than my heading 2. And it's on its way down to that minimum. We just don't have an actual preview of a screen that's that small. Okay, now if I flip over to the text system, you're gonna see that I have all of the sizes available to me here, just like I did with heading levels. It all works exactly the same. They all have font size overrides. Anything that you can do with headings, essentially, you can do with text as well. All right, now the fun begins, okay? We get to talk about overriding things, manipulating things, making things look like other things, and the power of Automatic CSS and the flexibility of Automatic CSS to empower you to do this. So here's a heading level 3. I want it to look like an H1. Now, some of you might say, well, Kevin, if you wanted to look like an H1, just change it to an H1, my friend. And that would be absolutely wrong and incorrect. Flag on the play, 15-yard penalty. You've absolutely screwed up the semantics of this website. Absolutely not. Do not do that ever. Go watch my Page Building 101 course before we put you in prison, okay? All right, so let's go back to an H3. If you want your H3 to look like an H1, what shall you do? Well, what a lot of people would do in the, the wild, wild west of web design is, assuming they're using a clamp function at all, for their H1, they'd be, let me go reference that clamp function and paste it in. Now they'll be the same. But then if they ever change in the future, they'll be out of sync. And then they recognize, oh, God, I guess I got to tokenize this. Okay, don't freak out. You don't have to do any of that because you're an Automatic CSS user. And all of this stuff has already been figured out for you, okay? If you want your H3 to look like an H1, just type /H1 and hit, not Y1, H1, and hit enter. And now it looks like your H1. Now, if you don't even want to type, you can right click the input. It's going to give you this nice little context menu. And because you clicked on a font size input, it's going to offer you font size options and heading sizes. H1 is right here. It's going to put in the variable for you. I don't even have to use the keyboard as an Automatic CSS user. Let's do that. Let's run that back. Let's look at that play again, okay? Right click, H1. Now it looks like an H1. If I remove it, it goes back, right click, H1, looks like an H1. It doesn't get it any easier than that. So this is text size and heading variables in action. Now, because this is a heading, does it mean I have to use heading variables? No, you could actually use any text size variable. Now, I'd probably recommend sticking with headings, okay? Because you don't want stuff to really get out of whack. But I mean, I could put any text size variable in here will work, right? I would recommend, though, because given the context of this is a heading, that you use different heading size options. However, if you need a tweener size, hey, Kevin, there's a special use case, and I actually need my H3 H3 size to just be like a little bit bigger, but you don't have an option for that, so I'm a little stuck. Well, you're actually not stuck at all, my friend, okay? So let's start by putting the H3 in here. And you're like, Kevin, why would you put the H3 variable on an H3 heading? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Well, it's because I can calculate it. I can just multiply it, right? So I can say times 1.1, it'll be 1.1 times bigger or 10% bigger, okay? So I hit enter and it's gonna wrap it in a calc. You see how Automatic CSS even goes the extra mile of saying, oh, this looks like a calculation. Let me wrap that in a calc formula for you. And now I have an H3, let's run that back. Look at it, got small. It's gonna get 10% bigger. Watch. I go H3. I don't even have to hit enter and wrap it in a var. I can say multiply by 1.1. Now hit enter. It wraps the var, wraps the whole calc formula, and now I have a heading that is 1.1 times bigger than my H3. It's still fluidly responsive, but it's that granular thing that I needed in this one-off instance. I don't have to create new variables. I don't have to do any shenanigans in the dashboard. Oh, create another size, add another size to the system, map all of that again. No. This is an on-the-fly change. I just need it for one little use case. We don't have to go through all that drama, okay? Just put a little calc function in here, move on with your life, and you're good to go. So that is an option for you as well. Now, same thing on the text side of things. Here is very, very small text. I want this to look like very big text. Well, this is using TextXS. So in this case, I would just remove this and say, you know what? I want to use text XXL. And when I put XXL on there, it becomes XXL. So the difference between headings and text in this regard is that headings actually have semantic meaning. An H1 means something. An H6 means something different. In the text world, a paragraph is a paragraph. Text is text, okay? And so it can just be any size that you want. Now, do you have to use the utility class? No, I can take that off. It's gonna be my base size. Now I can go to font size, right click, and I can choose any size that I want, and it'll just use the variable instead of the class. Okay, now pause, time out. Does that mean that using the class and using the variable are doing the same thing? No, they're not doing the same thing, okay? There is a key difference, a distinct difference that you must understand. A variable carries a value. It is a token for a single value. A variable cannot apply multiple values to something, but a class can, okay? So I'm gonna remove this. If I use the variable text XXL, the only thing that's gonna happen to this text is it gets the XXL text size. And then same thing over here. If I use the H1 variable, the only thing that's gonna happen is it's gonna get the font size of H1. Why? Because that's where I put it, and that's the value that that token carries with it, okay? So now I'm going to clear that out. I am going to use a class now. This is a big difference. I'm not using a variable now. I'm using a class. I'm going to use the class H1 right here. Now, you see, wait a minute, Kevin, that did the exact same thing. Well, maybe visually right now it did the exact same thing, but it actually is doing a lot more than the variable is doing, okay? And to illustrate this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save this page. I'm gonna take us to the front end for a second. So we have an H1 right here, and we have an H4 that looks like an H1, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to Automatic CSS Dashboard. I'm gonna go to Typography. I'm gonna go to H1, and I'm gonna go to letter spacing, and I am going to add 10 pixels up. Look at that. Wait a minute. I'm saying the H1, right, should have letter spacing of 10 pixels. Why is this H4 getting letter spacing of 10 pixels? Well, because we told it, we used the class H1, and the class H1 says this needs to look like a heading 1. And that doesn't just mean size, my friends. That means whatever the H1 is doing, this one needs to mimic it. It needs to do all the things that the H1 is doing. So if I make the H1 red, they'll both be red. If I make the line height something crazy like 4, they'll both have 4 on the line height, okay? So the class actually carries with it all of these styles right here, whereas the variable for the text size only carries the size. That's it. Okay, now you might be asking, you might be thinking ahead. You might be thinking ahead and you're like, okay, Kevin, that's very powerful, but I'd rather not use utility classes, if possible. I'm a big BIM guy. I'm a big custom class guy. Is there any way for me to make the H4 mimic the H1 without using a utility class? That's a big ask. That's a big ask. But the answer, because you're an Automatic CSS user, is yes, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back into bricks here, and I am going to show you, okay? Let's actually set some stuff here. So we're gonna go H1, let's make them red, right? Let's make the font weight, can we change the, I don't know if we can change the font weight because I don't have any others really loaded for headings. Letter spacing for sure we can do 5 pixels. How about we do an uppercase on our text transform? And how about we do italic on our head? We just want to make this as ugly as possible, okay? So that we can see what's going on. So I'm going to save this. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to remove the H1 class from this heading level right here. Okay, so let's get rid of it. It's gone, okay? Now, I need to refresh the builder, okay, to clear out some of the live preview styles here. Okay, perfect. So this is back to being just my standard H4. Now, I'm gonna give it a custom class, like my cool heading, right? And this could be any BIM class that you want, like card heading or something like that, okay? And I want this to look like an H1, but I have to avoid the utility class H1, okay? So what am I gonna do? By the way, if you can hear kids screaming in the background, this is not a social services situation, okay? They're playing in the sprinkler out back with friends, and so they're just screaming constantly. I don't know if you guys can hear it or not, but that's the situation. Don't call anybody, don't write me any letters, okay? That's what's going on in the backyard. All right, so here we go. Typography, what do I need to know? Everything over here in this list has a variable attached to it, and they all follow the exact name, okay? So I want the font size to obviously be H1. We already talked about that. What about the letter spacing? I can come down here and say H1 letter spacing, hit enter. Look at that. It is now adopting the letter spacing of H1. What else can I do? Text decoration? Oh, womp womp. The builder does not allow me to put a variable in here, but I could just come down here, root, right? And I can say, what was that? Text transform. And I can say H1 text transform. And now we're getting the text transform. What about up here for italic or uppercase? Oh, that was the uppercase. What about the font style, right? I can't choose a variable here, okay? So I would just have to go to custom CSS and do this manually, right? So we'll say font style, and we will say that that maps to H1 font style. Now it's getting the font style. What about under color? Let's go back to typography. Let's go to color. Let's go to raw. Let's say H1 color, just like that. Now it's getting the color. Everything in this list has a variable, has a token representing that value so that you can map anything to anything else. You can make anything look like the other thing, look like something it's not. And not just the size in this typography system, but every aspect of its style, the line height, the everything. Literally everything that has a control also has a token so that you can reference it. And that's true for every single heading level in the system, every single text size level in the system. There is maximum flexibility, maximum control, maximum customization, and of course, the maintainability and the scalability that comes with this system. Because now as I change things at the H1 level, things that I said, hey, you need to mimic whatever the H1's doing, those things are gonna change and update too. All right, that is a complete overview of the typography system in Automatic CSS. Again, if you have any questions, if you have trouble with anything, don't hesitate to comment below, or better yet, go to the support community, open a thread, let us know what's going on or what you have questions about, and we will be more than happy to jump in and help you. I will see you in the next lesson.